And we're back with some more Factorio. And today on our 16 locomotive 48 wagon train, we are going to have to figure out how to unload this sucker. This thing is sort of long, and what I've decided to do is divide it up into quarters. So we'll unload it 1 quarter at a time. And then we've got to figure out how we're going to get it out of the train, because there's a lot of resources that need to come out of it. This is how many transport belts of resources it would take if we wanted to unload just these wagons continuously, assuming we had trains coming in as quickly as we could replace them. So that's 67 transport belts, full transport belts, actually 66.6 transport belts, full of resources. That would be, no, there's just no way we can use transport belts. It's just not reasonable at all. Our only choice is going to be to use bots. Bots are going to look a little something like this. Now you have to realize there's going to be several trains. We're going to have a lot of different trains coming in, and we're going to have ones carrying all of the different raw materials. So you get your iron ore here, your copper ore, your coal, and your stone, and we're going to need oil, but you know what? We'll worry about that oil when we come to it, because that'll be a whole different kettle of fish. However, all of these trains will unload into these red passive provider chests. And what this does is provide resources onto the network. So you'll see there, they're unloading all the stone, the coal, the copper and iron. Now all of that gets stuck into the passive provider chests, and then we have these requester chests over here and a little roboport in the middle. Now what we do is we can set these up to request stuff. So we can say this one, we want you to request iron, and let's just say 250 of the stuff, and boom. And then those logistics robots come out and they grab up the iron ore from here and they dump it into the chest as requested. And you say we want to have 250 copper ore in that chest, another 250 iron ore in this one. We're going to need more iron and copper than other things, so let's just unpause it and watch as the robots go out and they grab all the resources and chuck them all into those chests. Of course, this allows us to unload the trains, and we should be able to do it quickly enough. Those robots have very high throughput over short distances. The longer those robots have to travel, you'll notice there they're having a hard time getting back into the roboport. The reason being, this thing can only recharge 4 robots at a time, meaning we should probably double down, give them more charging stations that they can go to, and they... Come on, seriously? No? Wow, okay, they've slowed down a bit. But realistically, the more roboports you have, the faster they can recharge. So we're going to need a lot of roboports and a lot of those little logistics robots in there to handle all of our needs. But that still leaves us with the question, how do we get all of these resources into a sort of a factory? Because if we just unload them like that and try and feed them directly into buildings using the logistics robots, it will kill the computer. It just couldn't handle it. Well, I don't think it could. So I think what we're going to have to do is take all of these resources, load them into chests, and then load them onto smaller trains. Now, actually, I'll build on the opposite side of this. We'll just grab one segment here, just say this segment here, and we're going to build sort of the unloading sequence I have in my head and hopefully see if we can get it to work. What we have here is a 411 train, and what it should be doing is it should pull in here, right opposite all of our drop-offs of our iron, copper, all of that, and then it's going to load up on the prerequisite amount of resources. Now, we'll get back to that because that's going to make things really complicated. But then, after this train has stopped for a reasonable amount of time, it will come over down here and drop off the iron ore and the copper ore, let's say, something along those lines. This is very much just a mock-up. This is not how big it's going to be, and there'd be all sorts of productivity modules and stuff that would be necessary in speed beacons. But it would drop off the iron and coal ore, the iron and copper ore, pick up the iron and copper plate, and then it would come over to, say, another section where it would drop off those resources and turn them into something else, like green circuits, red circuits, blue circuits, then pick those back up onto the exact same train, go along, and eventually you would get to producing science, and then takes that science to the science labs and produces the science. Then it would get all the way to the end and rotate all the way back and come back to pick up more resources. So if we go at the map here, you'll see it'd be a case of these things would just be rotating around in circles, picking stuff up and dropping it off. And I should really rename those stations. So that would be the guts of the plan. The question is, can these trains actually carry enough resources to do it? Because, well, there's a lot of resources they got to carry, and then there's a lot of intermediate products. And by what that I mean, just say we carry this amount of iron ore, and then we have to drop that off. Then we're going to have to pick up iron plate as well. We also have to carry the copper ore. We have to carry the green circuits. There's going to be, this train is going to be, well, what they call a sushi train. It's just going to have a whole bunch of random stuff in it. And we're going to have to specify in each carriage what each one of them is going to need. This is going to get a little complicated. I think I can simplify it. But the first thing we need to do is figure out how many trains we can cram through here and how fast. Or, actually, I think we might do these on a timer. As in, we have them stop for X amount of time and move on. Because there's no way to really trigger it to move if resources are missing. You know what? I'll start running the tests and we'll show it from there. This here is the mock-up of what it's going to look like. The trains will come down, they'll stop, they'll pick up some resources, then they'll move on. Just round and round and round they go. This is more of a train belt. Because we've got this on timers and it's not dependent on how much resources it picks up, it just stops for a specific amount of time and then moves on. These will just keep rotating forever and ever. And, you know, you put stations along the way to stop them at, and you can effectively turn trains into a transport belt. Well, that's the theory. However, there's a couple of other things we need to work out before we can start, using them that way. One is, how much resources does a train pick up when it stops? For example, this train here, we're going to set this to 1 second. It's going to stop for 1 second at a location, and when it does, we get to find out exactly how much resources it picks up in a 1 second stop. Where is it? Ah, yes, here it comes. Now remember, you can stick 6 inserters on this, so in one stop, this can hold 24 resources. That's not a lot. That means the inserter only got 2 actions off. Hold on while I put together a little bit of a test here, because we're going to test 1 second, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up. Before we go through the numbers, I want to show you an odd one. This one here is when you stop a train for 4 seconds, and this inserter down here, you'll notice that it's going to start loading it up, and off you go, and in 4 seconds it manages to put on 108 ore. I'll take that out. But notice the inserter. The inserter is facing forward and already holding more ore to stick onto the train. So then when the train comes around again, it starts loading it up. It should do 108, but it won't. Instead, it does 120. And then you'll notice the inserter is facing backwards. And then on the next round, it's going to do 108, then 120, then 108, then 120. It's one of those weird instances in Factorio where it's very, very rare, where things are not perfectly consistent every time round. I mean, okay, it is technically perfectly consistent in terms of it'll always do the same. Every second action, it'll do the same amount. It's just all the rest of the runs through it, they all actually have just, for example, if we set this to 5 seconds, the 5-second runs will always be the same, and the inserter will always end up facing the same direction. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, all of them, no difference between all of them. So, for example, 144, and the next round will also be 144. Train doesn't care, or well, Factorio doesn't care, and doom, 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 and stop exactly at 144. And off you go. And it will do that every single round. So consistent. This here is the results of the testing. If the train stops for 1 second, it will get off 24 resources per inserter. And if you had 12 inserters, you would get 288, because 12 is the maximum amount of inserters you can put on a train carriage. Well, actually, there's exceptions to that rule, but we're not parking on corners because it gets really weird, so we're not going to do that. Anyway, if you do 2 inserters, then you'll have 60 per stop and 720, or 2 seconds, 60 per stop, 720, 3 seconds, 84 per stop, 108, 4 seconds, well, that gets a little bit weird, so we just had to average it to 144, and this is the amount of resources it gives you. So this is the number we really care about, because this is how much, and why is that? There was a 0 missing for some reason. Anyway, I think the best option for us is to go with the 5-second one. The reason being, it gives us the most gains for the time we put in. You see, the more time we stop, the less throughput we will have on this train. As in, the longer the trains have to stop at stations, the less throughput we'll get overall. However, this gives us a nice blend. For example, if we go up to 6 seconds, we only gain 300 resources, but the difference between 4 seconds and 5 seconds is about 360. So it gives us just a little teensy bit of an edge. And as well as that, since the maximum amount of raw resources you can put on is 2,000, that's kind of a good balance. Though this does give us some other limitations that are going to come into effect later on. We need to remember, we only have 11 wagons, and with 12 inserters, that means we can only put on this much resources or take off that much resources on a single stop. Which means, okay, that's 19,008 resources. That's the most amount of resources we can ever take off a train in one stop, or put onto a train in one stop. Yeah, as I said, this is going to start getting more and more complicated as we start delving deeper into this. So we did a whole bunch of testing, and we got this little system here, and we have trains lined up, backed up all the way around, just to make sure that we're cramming trains in here as quickly as we can, just to see how many resources we can get across this line. The answer is not enough. Not enough by a long shot. We got 78 trains across it in the time of 13 minutes 47 seconds. Wagons per minute was 62.2, and the amount of resources we could get, which is multiplied by that, is 107,000. Basically, we require 179,000. We're not even close. We're not even near to close. Even if we got twice as much across it, we still wouldn't be doing any good. I have a couple of ideas, but, first one's first, and yeah, give me a minute. The plan here was quite simple. We just doubled the amount of trains going through. We split off the line right here, What happens is when this train starts going out, next train starts to slot in behind it, and then when this one goes out, next train can slot in there as well. Doesn't quite double the throughput, but it does come pretty close. And then after doing a bunch of testing, it's the same as before. We're just counting up, using an inserter here and a couple of signals. We're just counting up the train throughput. We're able to get how much we can cram through here. Now, one other change I had to make was I had to make it 2 lines over here. There's no way we could get these trains moving on a single line, so by doubling it up, we'll have to have 2 stations all the way along. It's an extra level of complexity, but we didn't really have much of a choice. Like I said, this design sort of designs itself in that once you figure out what numbers you're working with, you just sort of have to work around it. And here is the results. Now, I did have to chop down the train size a little bit to squeeze it onto the rails, but we managed to get 192 trains, 17 minutes, wagons per minute, resources 195,160. And what we did require is this much. However, there's a few problems. The main one being, if we do load up the trains like this, we won't have any other space for other stuff along the way. Yeah, it's still not enough. Now, I briefly toyed with the idea of making it a triple line, but there's a case of diminishing returns on this, like trying to get 3 trains to go in off the same time, and we'd have to start adding even more lines, and it would get even more confusing. So instead, I came up with an alternative idea. The original plan was everything would be, say, off to the left here, and we would have 4 modules. So 25% of all the production would go on in each one of these sections, and we'd be pulling the resources off the train. But what if we doubled up, and we had 4 modules on the other side as well? This means we only need to deal with, instead of just dealing with a quarter in each section, we need to deal with 1/8. That halves the amount of resources we'd need to get out, meaning if we do use this double train station design that we've got down here, oh wait, where is it? This double train station design down here to pull off the resources off each section of the train, we can actually make that work. We can do it. Like I said, this thing kind of designs itself once you start getting into it, because you just don't have any choices but to do it that way. Now, what we want to do is make sure that all these trains are nice and close together as well, because the closer they are to the roboports, the faster we can pull resources off. But I think we can do even better than this. The thing is, we're looking at it there as if we jam all the trains in and have this on each side. That's going to make it very difficult to navigate. So what if we split it? We have a triple set of stations here, then a gap, then another triple set of stations where we can have it on the opposite side. Ooh, let me mock this up for a second. After a little bit of work, this is what we've sort of ended up with. We've got a set of unloading trains on this side that all get pulled off into sections over here, and a set of unloading trains on this side that all get pulled off over into this section. Well, that's the theory. And then they all meet up here at the end to go into that little 3-way intersection that we designed earlier, so that we know that they can make it out in time. I suppose that this makes it easier for the trains to get out. The reason being, you look at these trains here, they're only going to have half a load on each side, in fact slightly less. So if there's only half the trains coming through here and half the trains coming through here, it doesn't matter if we combine them all into a little single rail. It's only half throughput on each of these sections. All we need to care about is this section, remember? And that should work. Now in the middle you'll see I've put in the oil train. The plan is to actually bring in all the oil in the middle and then have all the oil processing right here adjacent to these trains, and then we can pump over the necessary ingredients to whatever we build on this side. We can have more oil processing on this side for this section. So each thing is going to be sort of modular. Because it's going to be a 6,000 science per minute base, and we've divided it up into 8 bases, each one of these chunks is just going to have to deal with building 750 science per minute. That's it. So we can conveniently figure out what we need in here, and then so long as we do that, we can basically replicate that to the other 8 sections. So we only have to work it out once, and once we've worked it out once, we're done. However, feeding the trains in is going to be a problem. When the trains come back in, how do we split up the trains so that they don't interfere with each other? I think we'll have to come back to that one. I think for the time being, the plan should be we're going to have to... actually, you know what? I want to figure that out now. The problem we face with the returning trains is, well, throughput. Even, it doesn't matter how many rails we bring them in on, we're probably going to feed them into something like this, and then we're going to feed that into the rest of the rails. The problem is, this is a big, long section where the trains won't be able to get through at full speed. We can't just go with a single stacker. If we go with a single stacker, this is going to become our bottleneck instead of the other side of our base with a single rail. In other words, we won't be able to feed in the trains quickly enough. So I'm thinking we need 2 stackers. But how we separate that out gets weird. Like, just imagine, oh, we only need 4 here. We're going to need iron, copper, stone, and coal. Or is it iron, copper, coal, and then stone? Whichever one's the highest throughput requirements. We'll put, say, iron on the inside because iron is the most frequently used resource, so that one will be the closest to the transfer section. Then copper comes next, then I think it's coal, I want to say, and then stone. With all of those there, what I would like to do is something like this. We would, say, grab this section here, and this would be exclusively a stacker for just our iron trains. we would have all of our iron trains stack up here. We had all the other types stack up here. The reason we want iron over here is because iron is the one that's used most frequently. The copper and the other ones are about 50%, a little bit over. So then what we could do is, since all of the iron is coming through here, that will free up about 12% of the resources, or 12% of the track would be freer than normal. So we can do this. Oh, no, a little bit further. Damn it, too far. Well, the plan would be we'd get rid of this, and instead of feeding it from that stacker over there, this would come across. Now it's going to, let's just say this signaling on this would be an absolute nightmare, but we can do it. So we have copper and coal and stone all stack up over here. We have all the iron stack up over here, and then we have them feed in this way. Only about 12.5% of the time will this be blocked by an iron train going through. And then we'll just have a little bit of a waiting station outside of all of these. And I think we can get this to run at full capacity. Though, yeah, this is all theoretical, and I'm not going to bother testing it until I've actually got the whole thing built, because you know what? We can fiddle around with the train stackers once it's done. But that should, in theory, work. Well, that's what my brain tells me, though my brain is hurting an awful lot. The joy of Factorio, it just makes your brain hurt all the time. Now, next up. Yeah, I think next section should be designing the oil. Reason being is the amount of oil we're going to need, there's not enough space here. That is just way too small of an arithmetic in what the oil we need. We need to do enough oil for 750 signs per minute. Let me have a quick check. Checking the numbers, it's not actually that bad. We're only going to need about 30 oil refineries and about, 30 chemical plants. Though, yeah, we're considering all the piping and stuff we're going to have to fit in, that's going to be a little bit of a squeeze. We're definitely going to have to stretch this area out a little bit more. In fact, I think I'm going to have to demolish a whole chunk over here just to make room for it. This, so far, is pretty much just covering all the theory crafting of what the base is going to, well, how the base is going to function, the overall function of it. Most of the stuff from here on in is going to be actual practical designs, where we have to basically wire up 30 oil refineries. That's going to take a little bit longer on the side for me to get done, because I'm not sure how I'm going to pipe up 30 oil refineries. That's going to be an interesting challenge. Interesting. Never mind how we're going to unload the oil. That can wait till the next episode. But one little design consideration is down here, let's say. This is going to be a 2-train loader. So the 2 trains are going to load up with the resources from our big main train that would be along here. And then when we unload them, we're going to use, well, basically bot building. What'll happen is the resources will get unloaded here, then we'll feed them into whatever we're using. Either, furnaces, chip construction, whatever we actually need. It will get unloaded, processed, and then loaded back up into these trains. The great thing about this is they're actually wide enough as well. This section is wide enough that we're not going to have any overlap between these trains or these robot stations and any of the robot stations that will be in the modules adjacent. So each section of this should be self-contained and have no interference from the others. Should make it very handy. But no, I'm not going to wander anymore. I've already burnt out my brain for today. Instead, I'm going to cut this out here. Next episode will be all about doing oil modules and probably furnaces, and if we've got time, probably green circuits as well. I want to hammer those all out. I want to sort of get all the guts of this design built out so we can start implementing it on the main base. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this slightly odd series, and good luck. This playthrough has got to be one of the more bizarre playthroughs I've done. We haven't actually really played the game how it's meant to be played yet. We're just designing stuff and figuring out how we're going to design it. And that's kind of how it goes with Factorio when you get far enough into it. Trying to design your mega base takes more time than actually building it. Well, hopefully. I'm still working away in the background on this Ani episode, but it's just, I would need to get a nuclear reactor in here so we can power this whole thing, because we got to rip out the solar, and it's just going to take a while. So that's why this episode is taking so long to come out. I usually do a little bit of this in the background when, I'm responding to comments or stuff like that. Still going to be a couple of weeks on any update on that PC. When I am building it, I'll take a few pictures of it and just show people what it looks like. I think there was a few people who were curious, but I don't think I do a whole episode on it. It's just going to be some, computers are a bit like Lego when you stick them together now.